And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
Ted, welcome to the show.
It's so good to be back on with you guys again. Thanks for having me back on. It was my pleasure to host the show last Monday night. I hope you got a good response off of it. We've got a whole bunch of new stories I'm going to talk to you about tonight. I'm going to talk about what's going on with Coca-cola, what's going on with their GMOs, what's going on with McDonald's. We've got a ton of stuff. We're going to talk about cancer. We're going to talk about heart disease. We're going to talk about diabetes again, natural treatment, all treatment protocols without the use of drugs. We're going to cover a lot of information, a lot of cutting-edge stories. I also want to talk about Putin and his central bank because Dr. McCowan and I had talked about that last Monday night in detail about that Russia had a Rothschild-controlled central bank, and some information on the news has come forward of what happened last fall when Putin said that he was going to get rid of the Rothschild-controlled central bank. And I can guarantee you, before he got rid of the Rothschild-controlled central bank, they're going to do to him what they did to Tsar Nicholas and his family back in the early 1900s. And they're not going to be around. So it's kind of weird. He disappears for almost a week. So we're going to talk about that with an opening story. But I want to share something with you real quick. Sharon's sitting in here with the studio with me right now, and I'd give you a testimonial with her real quick. About 5 years ago, Sharon's my wife of 31 years. She's 58 years old, and those of you who've ordered the Breakthrough Health book, you've seen a photo of her on the front of the book because she helped me write that book. And one of the chapters in there, she actually talked about menopause and menopausal symptoms and what could be done to ameliorate the symptoms of menopause and how you can get your old life and your old attitude and your old memories and your old personality back when you go into menopause. And she wrote a whole chapter on that. And it was a pretty good chapter, and I'm really glad we figured out how to fix all that because it was a pretty rough year until we got it figured out as far as supplement-wise. But what happened about 5 years ago, we had a yard man. His name was Michael Ferry, great man. He was a great friend. He'd been with me for 5 years. He was a maintenance supervisor for the company. And what had happened to him is he had ended up having bypass surgery at the age of 57. And I had pleaded with him not to do it. I told him there were natural things that we could do to eliminate his problems with his heart. But he didn't listen. He went and had bypass surgery, and then I brought him back to work about 6 months later, and he was never the same. And then finally one day he died in his sleep and at home in bed, and it was a sad time. But about 4 or 5 days later, Sharon, we had no yard guy. It was the middle of the summer when all this happened. There were a bunch of weeds in the front beds around the house, and she went out there and just voraciously started yanking weeds out of the beds. And when she did that, the next day her fingers had swollen on her right hand, and to the point where she couldn't make a fist. Does that make sense? Her fingers were so swollen, and they were in extreme pain. Her joints had actually inflamed, and this didn't go away. And we've been fighting this now for the past 5 years. And I told Sharon, this is ridiculous. We've got to be able to figure out a protocol to get rid of this. In addition to that, about 4 years ago, she had been diagnosed with spinal stenosis about 10 or 12 years ago. We had developed several product protocols in order to help get rid of the spinal stenosis, which is a calcium outcroppings on the inside of the spinal cord column, which pinch and impinge on the nerves, which cause all kinds of problems when you sleep at night, when you try to walk, with your hips, with pain. So she was having tremendous neurological pain in her hips. And about 4 years ago, we ended up having to take her all the way to a neurological chiropractor up in Alabama, which is like an 8-hour drive from the house, to try to get relief for her because she was about to have to go under surgery. And then finally we found another chiropractor. His name is Dr. James Kinsey. He's in the Kissimmee area. He's also a neurological chiropractor. That's Kinsey, great guy. And we went in to see him, and he was able to help her, but it was never quite right. She'd go to sleep at night. She'd have extreme pain, shooting pains through her hips and through her legs. So finally, probably about 2 months ago, we developed a magnesium protocol. Now, the biggest problem with magnesium, even though we use one of the highest quality oral magnesiums on the market, is magnesium acts primarily as a laxative in most people. So it's very difficult to absorb magnesium through the intestinal tract. So I started doing extensive research, and I started finding out that magnesium, which I already knew, was used in hundreds of biochemical reactions in the body, everything from energy to magnesium to calcium absorption, everything. And so what was happening with Sharon is she was in a severe magnesium deficiency, which a lot of people are in, and causing a lot of arthritic conditions, including the spinal stenosis. And so we put together a topical magnesium protocol for her in which she was using the magnesium bath salts. We were able to source them out and get a really high quality venue of that, and plus magnesium oil, magnesium deodorant, which, by the way, is all natural and works better than any deodorant you can ever put on your body without aluminum in it. And it's been about 6-7 weeks now. And Doug and Joe, she has no more pain in her fist. She completely closed her fist. She feels like she's 30 years old again. Her energy is running through the roof, and she sleeps at night without any hip or pain whatsoever in her legs or feet. I mean, isn't that amazing?
Indeed it is. And
she asked me tonight. She says, "Ted, can you please do me a favor?" And I said, "What's that?" And I said, "Can I please talk to the people for about 2 minutes on the show tonight and tell them that there's hope for this, there's hope for spinal stenosis, there's hope for these calcium outcroppings, there's hope for bone spurs." And so if it's okay with you, I'm going to give her about 2 minutes, if that's all right, and let her tell you a real basis of her story real quick.
Ted, let me just say this. My wife is about the same age as your wife. She's listening, and she's got similar problems and arthritis, horrible arthritis, painful, that is, in her hands. So, honey, if you're listening, well, I know you are, just at home, listen up. So, Sharon Brewer, absolutely. Let's bring her on. Sharon Brewer, giving a testimony as to the protocol just described. Sharon, welcome.
Okay, here she is, Doug.
Hi, Doug. Thank you so much for letting me come on and share this with everyone. I am so excited. I don't know what to do. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced back pain to the point where you almost are ready just to go home and be with the Lord, and any type of joint pain. I can't tell you how excited I am, and I wanted to share this with the listeners because this is all about helping people. And we're in the business of helping people, and that's one of the most rewarding things that we do, are getting the testimonies back from people, knowing that they're being set free from sickness, disease, and getting off, when they choose to get off the drugs and stuff, and they can do it nutritionally. So we developed a protocol, and I said, well, I'm going to have to be the first one to do this to see if it works. I was going to give it probably about 3 months. After the first month, my energy was through the roof, and it still is. I feel like I'm 30 years old again. We have a really nice gym facility here, and I was so frustrated because we work out 6 days a week, and I couldn't go in and work out as hard as I wanted to because it was too painful, and I paid the price at night when I went to bed. But we've got a magnesium oil that's topical. It's amazing how quickly it absorbs into the skin because your skin is your largest eliminating organ. It also absorbs nutrients. What I do, I put it on my feet, then I put my socks on, so it's absorbing all day. I'll soak in the mineral salts. I put the deodorant on. It's the best deodorant I've ever used. And it also gives me peace of mind because as a woman with breast cancer and lymphatic problems and all that we work with, I'm using a product in that area, under the arm area, and I'm using a product that's actually helping and not hurting. It's not aluminum. It's not things that are bad for you, but something that's actually helping my body, and it's absorbing the calcium that way. Also, I've got a sports oil that's got the magnesium in it, and if I work out too hard or something, I rub it in areas where I need a little bit extra help. But I just want to appreciate you for allowing me to come on and talk about this because we've got to give people hope, and you guys are doing such a great job doing that, and I just thank you so much for having my husband on to share that with you, because if we aren't helping people, why are we even here?
Oh, exactly.
It's just so exciting to be able to help people.
Well, and I want to direct people, Sharon, just hang on with us for a second. I just want to direct people, if you go to Hagman at Hagman.com, in the middle column there's a picture of Sharon and Ted, of course, Breakthrough Health, the cover of that book. Click on that book. It'll take you to healthmasters.com. And then, of course, from there, Sharon, you're talking about the magnesium topical 5-pack kit, right, that you use?
Right. It's a 5-pack protocol that we use. Now, what's so also exciting is we have a bar of soap that's coming out. We're working on it right now, and I'm excited about that. So you can actually take a bath in it. You can soak in it. You can actually, I think we're coming out with a shampoo also. So anything I put on my body now, I want this magnesium oil in it. That's how excited and I know it works. So, just go to the website.
Okay, but I got to ask you this: for your hands, what'd you do? Just like rub your hands in the oil, or rub the oil into your joints?
Well, it's not so much that. I soaked in the salts. I actually
Okay.
rubbed it on my hands, and then also, like I said, every morning before I put my shoes on, sometimes I'd soak my feet in it, wipe them off, and then maybe put some of the oil on it on my feet, and then put the socks on. So all day my body's absorbing it. And that's the whole key, is that your body is taking in what it needs, and it's dissolving those spurs, and that's where the pain comes from. I mean, when you could barely make a fist, I was feeling old, and I don't want to get old this young. I mean, I feel really like I'm in my 30s again. It's so I know I am redundant, but I'm ecstatic with joy.
That's great.
One of our sitters one time said to our kids, that's just. But what you guys are doing is so wonderful, and I thank you for allowing me to share that with you. I'm going to give you back to Ted, and
all right.
God bless you guys.
God bless you as well. Thank you so much.
Sharon, would you be willing to drive over to the office real quick and take a few phone calls from people who want to call? All right. She said she'd be happy to. So if I can give out a phone number real quick, Doug.
Yeah, sure.
It's 863-967-0244, 863-967-0244. If you don't have internet access, you don't have an 800 access, or you're calling from out of the country, or it's 800-726-1834. Give her about 10 minutes to drive to the office. 800-726-1834. Yep. And if you go to the website, on the website on the front page, there's actually a little block there. You can click on magnesium protocols, like 5 products, and we want you to do the whole package because we wanted it to work like it did for Sharon, because we had to develop this whole protocol. And, of course, it's right under the Hagman blood sugar protocol, which is still up on the website. I got tired of telling everybody what was going on with that. But let me real quick. Let me jump on before we start on all these nutrition things. Let me just read you this real quick. And I sent a copy of this thing to you guys because I wanted to see what you guys thought about this. The whole thing about this is with Putin. Putin said back last December that he was going to nationalize the Rothschild Central Bank in Russia and purge the collaborators of the Rothschilds that have come in and tried to take over Russia. And he said that he's going to start this. And in fact, I sent you this article. It was posted on December the 15th by Anders, and it said he was under heavy pressure from outside and inside that Western sanctions were intended to crash the price of oil. And despite the efforts of the Rothschild-controlled Central Bank of Russia and the use of dozens of billions of foreign exchange reserves, the value of the ruble has dropped by 39%. And Russia was actually being forced to accept U.S. dollars and U.S. bonds from the sale of their oil. And he had said he had enough of it and he wasn't going to do it anymore. And I didn't know if you guys were aware of that or not, but I learned that from Dr. McCall, who was on the show with me last Monday night, about that Putin was wanting to get rid of the Russian central bank because it was a Rothschild-controlled institution, and he was kind of like what Hitler was doing, because they put Hitler into power too. That he threw them out and started running his own money, printing his own currency, and they didn't want any country to know that you could actually print your own currency debt-free and be prosperous without having the enslavement from the banking cartel.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw the article you sent over. Man, I'll tell you something. We know that who is it? Well, I think it was Rothschild that has a vacation home, if you will. I'm not sure what the Russian word for that is in the former Soviet Union, and spent some time there. Now, having said that, what do you make of all this in light of current events? I mean, I get the fact that the Rothschild. I get the role of the Rothschild Central Bank there. I get the West, how we are screwing around over there with this asymmetrical warfare. But let's just look at this in a wider sense. Well, what do you think? I mean, I defer to you on your broader picture, given your sources and resources and in reading the information you have. What do you think is going to take place here? What do you see taking place now?
If Putin really said this, he's a dead man. If Putin really wants to get rid of the Rothschild-controlled central bank, he's either going to retire in Argentina, where Hitler went, I guess, according to Henry McCall, and or he's going to be out of power, and they're going to use a double, and with the next elections, they're going to fold him out. And then I got another link today from another source that said that he was that they were using a body double now with his last appearance him a couple of days ago, and that wasn't actually Putin. They were showing close-up pictures. Now, Joe, I don't know if any of this stuff is real, okay? I don't know if the pictures are right. I don't know what's real. All I know is odd to me he disappeared like he did. All I know that if he's saying he's getting rid of the Rothschild-controlled central bank, remember, this is why they got rid of Tsar Nicholas. Tsar Nicholas refused to put in a Rothschild-controlled central bank, and that entire Russian Revolution was brought about by the according to Henry McCowan, he's absolutely right about this. It was brought out by the Sabbatain Frankists, basically continuing to fund through the central banks and starting the war in Russia. Sadly enough, I mean, until we get rid, this is what Ron Paul says too, until we get rid of the central bank of the United States, get rid of the Federal Reserve System, and we nationalize their assets here, and we get rid of all this debt that they created out of nothing, should be nothing, which should all go away to them, we're not going to get out of this mess. Because they control and run Congress, and they control and run everything else. So we can keep cutting the snakes, the heads off to all these different this 100-headed monster. But until we kill this central bank and get rid of this thing, what they call it, a giant vampire squid, I think Rolling Stone called it. I mean, until we get rid of this thing and get it out of the United States and get back to where we were printing real money back since 1912. We're not going to get over it. I mean, we've had 100 years of this tyranny with these guys now, and it's not going to go anywhere. That's where I see it going, Doug, because I don't believe for a second that we're going to start a thermonuclear war with Russia. I was reading some stuff just the other day, and it said that what happens is, and they didn't realize this when they did it, because we know there's like 13 known dimensions, and when you detonate a bomb in our three bottom dimensions, it affects all 13 dimensions. In other words, it tears holes through the fabric of space-time when nuclear weapons are detonated. And that's when we started having all of this quote-unquote extraterrestrial sightings and all these spaceships landing and all this other kind of stuff started really happening in just huge amounts since 1947. Now, whether you believe that stuff or not, something's going on up there. We have an entire space command for our military. And, and if you read the book, the day after Roswell, the man says that we have entire space platforms out there that Reagan built those particle beam weapons in and on that are aimed outward, not inward towards the country. They're aimed out towards outer space. So, all these people can't be lying about this stuff. What did Panetta say a few weeks ago? He wishes when he was the press secretary that he would have at least gone in and told the truth about what was going on with the extraterrestrial activity right now that's happening. And, we don't know if these are fallen angels or other angels or extraterrestrials or yet to be defined life forms. We have no idea. All we know is something weird is really going on, and now we've got Putin disappearing, showing back up, and now we've got people saying he's a body double, and all of a sudden he's saying he wants the Rothschild banking cartel out. Now he's become awful silent, and, Putin's never been silent. We all know that. So I don't know. I think it's interesting that this is actually happening. I think it's just another foretelling of the fact that we're getting closer and closer to the end. I believe that the United States is going to have to handstand in the aggregate and pray on an ongoing basis. I mean, between the GMOs, the fluoride, the statin drugs, the diabetes drugs, all of these different things that are going on a regular basis, if we do not do something, Joe, if we do not stand as a nation, I got a feeling this country is about to come to a screeching halt. I give us about 36 months before we have something major happen again, and we end up losing more and more and more of our rights. That's where I think this is going. But as far as Putin still being alive, I have no idea. As far as Russia getting rid of the central bank, it's not going to happen unless they have a major coup in that government and throw all these guys out.
Well, it's interesting because the article that you did send to us here about Putin, it's written by an Andrews. This is back from December 15th of 2014.
That's right.
Okay, Putin's confident. Putin to nationalize Rothschild Central Bank and purge collaborators with West. War till one side collapses inevitable. So, okay, here, according to this article, and this is the abstract from the article says that Putin is under heavy pressure from within and from without, basically, and that Western sanctions and intended oil price crash. Now, it's interesting because let's talk about that. The oil prices, we're paying less at the pump. That's good for us, really. I mean, good for the American economy, or so goes the official narrative. But what's really going on here? Is it this glut of oil, or is oil being used as a weapon? I believe it's being used as a weapon specifically against Russia, asymmetrical economic warfare. Having said that, only because low oil prices do not benefit Russia. They hurt Russia, as a matter of fact, on a global national scale, nation-state level. So I do believe that the oil prices, or the oil prices, are being manipulated to crash the Russian economy. Kind of, that's just part of what's going on. Now, having said that, you've got a Rothschild insider in Putin. Do we not have? Isn't Putin kind of a in a sense, and hasn't he been a Rothschild insider or a globalist? Isn't he? But
yes.
At least been playing one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he has. And also, he was trained with the Secret Service there, with the British Secret Service. So I think, the same thing, Hitler was put in by the Rothschild banking cartel. We know that. We also know the globalists put Hitler in. And then what ended up happening, Hitler pretty much turned on them. I guess he decided his Satan group was better than their Satan group. If you read the book Pawns in the Game, it talks about
Right.
this by William Carr. And so what ends up happening after that, then they get tired of what Hitler's doing, so they decide they're going to put him back on a chain, and then they negotiate with him. And see what nobody understands, and this is I read this in Henry Macau's latest book. He had, I think it was Gorman was one of the top generals with Hitler and one of the other top people with the Nazi Party. And it may Borman or Gorman, I can't remember. I don't have the book here in front of me. And what happened is he started giving secrets to the Soviets as far as troop movement with the Germans. In addition to that, there have been multiple reports that Hitler had detonated 2 nuclear devices before the end of the war. And Jim Marrs says in his book, The Fourth Reich, he said that the 2 bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were both German bombs. Now, Jim Marrs is pretty doggone accurate. I mean, he very rarely says anything he can't prove. And what's interesting about this, and now you got Macau saying the same thing, that Hitler had this nuclear technology, he chose not to use it, and he was whisked away from Germany there at the end of the war and taken to Argentina, via submarine. And now we know that Russia has done a DNA test on the skull that was supposed to be a fragment of Hitler, and it was a female. It wasn't a male. So
Right.
we know that wasn't Hitler. So now we have no remnants of Hitler whatsoever that were found in a bunker. No one saw Hitler kill himself, and that aircraft left just a few hours, a few days before the whole Germany fell. So I personally don't believe Hitler died in that bunker. I don't believe he did. I used to didn't. I didn't really know. But I wanted to do all the research and keep reading it all. But there's too much stuff that, and the State Department shutting down all the resources trying to find Hitler in Argentina, and suddenly Hitler doesn't use his nuclear weapons. Suddenly his nuclear weapons are dropped on this. See, this whole thing's a banker's game. It's a rich man's trick is all it is. It's these Rothschild boys that are running around doing all this. And Henry Macau the other night, he was very, very clear on your show last Monday night that that's what's going on with all of this, and that we've had a giant satanic Luciferian takeover of the planet by the cult of the all-seeing eye. And I tell you what, the more I read his stuff, I've got the other 2 books in a series coming in right now, the more sense he makes, Doug, because the reality is, how in the world did Hitler lose a war if he had nuclear technology and nuclear weapons? I mean, you talk about so far ahead of everybody that it seems it would be impossible to have done that. It was Bormann were the traitors. Bormann was the one, and he was exposed. I'll read you this portion of the book real quick. He says, despite the fact that the vital information continued to leak, Gellin and Canaris left it at that. Neither of us was in any position to announce the Reich stopped Bormann with any prospect of success. In his book, Hitler's Traitor, Louis Kiltzner estimated that Bormann was worth 50 divisions to the Soviets. After the war, Gellin, who headed the West German intelligence agency, was able to confirm Bormann's treason. During the 1950s, I was passed 2 separate reports from behind the Iron Curtain to the fact that Bormann had been a Soviet spy agent. The fact that Hitler had sheltered Bormann and shielded Bormann confirms that he also was an active traitor. Both served the Illuminati Masonic bankers, the Rothschild crime syndicate based in London. The Illuminati were also behind Stalin and communism, not to mention Churchill and FDR. This would make a whole lot more sense when you look at what happened after the war, and Europe was cut in half, and half of it was given to the Soviets for the Soviet Union to be formed. I mean, how the heck did that happen? How did Poland and Czechoslovakia and all those different countries get handed over to the Russians? I mean, that's just nuts. But that's what they did, and that's the question that is posed by William Carr. So I think what's happening, Doug and Joe, I think we're finally starting to unravel the mystery of what really went on during World War II, and how the industrialists, the globalists, the Rothschilds, and all these guys are together doing all of this, because what he said, it was this satanic cult, this Kabbalist group of bankers had started this mess, and the other head of that hydra was the Masonic lodges, and how they were doing it with it, and how they brought all this stuff into play. And so the whole thing is starting to make this big mosaic, starting to make more and more sense about how Hitler lost World War II with all that advanced technology. In fact, Jim Marrs said in one of his books, he said in the Fourth Reich, if you read it, he goes, I still don't understand how Hitler lost this war. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's what he said, because it doesn't make any sense how he could have out this super, I mean, he had jet technology, nuclear weapon technology, and he loses the war, really? Well, he wasn't supposed to have won that war, and that's what happened. I believe that now.
And let me bring this out a little bit further, because we need to spend some time talking about this, because there's a lot of stuff that happened back in World War II and subsequent to that during the Cold War that we're living out today, and I believe. And here's one example. Now, people will look at this and say this is just nonsense, but I would urge people to dig a little bit deeper into what I'm about to say. And I mentioned this yesterday during the show, but if you look at where Germany is right now in terms of its position within the European Union, and then the value of the money and the value of the dollar, and having said that, who's running Germany? Angela Merkel. Well, what's her background? And when you start digging into her background, okay, you get nothing really. I mean, she's really not. Well, she's not.
She's an East German. That's right. She's raised in East Germany under Russian rule.
Exactly. Now. Okay, now I'm going to give you just some things that are just, folks, this kind of freaked me out. And I started digging, and I'll tell you something. The debunkers of what I'm about to say, I'd be a little bit careful to debunk this, but here's a couple of things. There was a guy by the name of Dr. Klauberg back during the Third Reich who was, well, you can search for him on the Internet. And you had mentioned Martin Bormann and such, but Angela Merkel, it's very likely, could be you ready for this, Ted? The offspring of Hitler and Eva Braun's sister. Now, Dr. Klauberg had done some work with Hitler to freeze his essence, and I mentioned this yesterday, okay? I found it very interesting that according to records, some files, Stasi GDR files, for example, show that she was born on April 20th, 1954. However, her official biography says she was born on this date, July 17th, 1954. Why is that important? I'll tell you why. MH17, shot down. When was it? July 17th of the last year. TWA Flight 800, shot down. July 17th, 1996. By the way, 17 years between 1996 and 2004. July 17th, again, the ostensible birthday of Angela Merkel. Now, I know this sounds weird, but if you keep digging down into this, are we not seeing this progeny of the Third Reich live on, and this, what would you call it, this continuation of the Third Reich? As other people talk about, as Russ Dizdar and Paul McGuire talk about, and you talk about?
Well, no, I believe that because, remember Russ Dizdar goes into detail on the Lebensborn program, and that was when they were combining the strongest, smartest, tallest, biggest, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Nazi SS people with the tallest, biggest, blondest, females. And he said almost 1 million of them were born through the Lebensborn program. And it was so funny. My daughter Alexis just finished a 4-month cultural exchange program with our relatives in Germany. And Alexis told me today, she says, Dad, it was so weird over there. She goes, I'm the tallest person in my class at church. She's in 8th grade. And she goes, I was the shortest person in class when I went to the German schools. She goes, I felt like a midget. She goes, the girls were huge, the guys were huge, they were all huge. And I started laughing at her, and I said, Alexis, I don't want to say this because, it sounds kind of weird, but that's what I know Russ Dizdar. It's probably from the stupid Lebensborn program when you put 1 million more people into the doggone DNA pool that are tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. And she goes, Dad, their eyes are so blue. She goes, it's ridiculous how blue eyes they have. And she goes, and I said, I know. And I said, the whole thing's just weird to me too, Alexis. I go over there, I feel like I'm walking around an Aryan world, And I said, this whole thing, unless the Muslims are there. There's a lot of Muslims there and a lot of other people and gypsies. They don't have the same, but the native-born Germans. And it was so funny. I had one of my copywriters that I used years and years ago. He knew one of the Lebensborn men. I never told you this, Doug. And he told me this guy was about 6'4". He's in his 70s now, and he was blonde hair, blue eye. He said he still had like 7-8% body fat. He said the guy was unbelievable, muscled up still in his 70s, and he was absolutely off the chain on brilliance. And he said the guy was just like not normal. And I thought to myself, okay, remember what Russ Dizdar said. He said a lot of these kids were born, with that satanic programming in them. And on and on and on and on. So I don't know what's going on. All I know is that 20% of the people in Germany now want to revolt against their own government for signing on to the Greece bailout debt. They're all mad. Right. They were burning cars in Frankfurt. I'm scheduled to fly to Frankfurt in 2 weeks. So I told Sharon, I said, they're burning cars in Frankfurt now because they're so angry that Greece has defaulted, that the euro has collapsed, that their prices have gone up so much for their imports, and that they're now stuck. They had signed off on the hundreds of billions of dollars in debt that the German people are now going to have to pay because Greece has said, no, we're not paying this anymore, because Greece is waking up and said, you know what, we don't want to play this banker game. And so it's interesting, Doug, but no, it all goes back to those stupid Nazis. I mean, that's what Russ Dizdar says. That's what Jim Marrs says. George Bush's dad, Prescott Bush, we know was a Nazi collaborator, had his assets frozen, was going to be charged with trading with the Enemies Act, and then all that stuff was restored to him after the war. And then he started the USO, I guess the stuff with when they're going over the entertaining the troops to try to get his name back. And then of course he went into the White. And if you watch that video, JFK to 9/11, which is it's a rich man's trick, a phenomenal video, 3.5-hour video. It shows pictures of George Bush. It looks like George Bush at the Kennedy assassination in Dallas. In addition to that, we know he was involved heavily with the CIA. We know that after Reagan was shot in the White House after the first month or so in office, that Bush basically ran that White House for the next 8 years, in addition to running it 4 years of his own term. And all these horrible things that he did while he was there, then what Clinton did, and then what George Jr. did, and now with Barack Obama, he's like the cherry on the top of fascism on this country. And now we're going into a deeper and deeper hole that we've never thought could ever happen in the United States. And this is exactly what my mom told me happened in Germany. She said they never expected all that crap to happen with Hitler. She said we had no idea this was going to happen to us, and we had no idea that he was going to kill everybody like he did, and say the German people didn't deserve to live. I mean, remember when Stalin was coming in and the Russians were coming into Berlin, and all the women and children were hiding in the subways? Hitler ordered the subways to be flooded, killed hundreds of thousands of Germans himself, flooded out the subways, drowned the women and the children because he didn't want the Russians using the subways for troop movements. He knew he was going to do that. He didn't care. I mean, so how in the world could somebody who cared that much about that country be willing to sacrifice so many people like that? And I still want to know why in the world Churchill thought it was okay to bomb and kill 500,000 people in Dresden a few months before the war was over, with, again, all women and children, when there was no strategic assets in Dresden. I mean, when these people get cranked up, when these Rothschild bankers get cranked up and they start killing people, I mean, the sky's the limit. They don't care who they kill, Doug. They really don't. Yeah. And that's the sad part. If we get involved with these guys in a world war, they won't care what they do or who they kill. Look at what they're doing with the GMOs, for heaven's sakes, and how they're poisoning everybody with GMOs. Look at what they did. We've got more people dying of Ebola again over in the Horn of Africa, and we know that cannibal laboratory was closed down in Sierra Leone by the government because they said they were intentionally giving these Ebola vaccines and infecting people in Africa, which was the main cause of the spread of the Ebola virus last summer, and now that's all starting back up again. Dr. Francis Boyle, who wrote the Biological Weapons Treaty Act of 1989, he said that they put in the act that they would not be allowed to do that in the United States anymore, so they use those people as guinea pigs over there all the time to see how many of those people they can kill. And then Bill Gates doesn't care. He's infected them with about everything they can anyhow, trying to reduce the population rate over there. So these are the people that are in charge.
Yeah. Now, look, folks, a hard, difficult truth sometimes when you have to face it. But you mentioned about Dresden, going back in the conversation. Look, you've got to look at the context in which these actions were done. Was that necessary? How many, were killed? Or we're playing by the same template today. Once again, you have to approach this, and I would urge everyone to approach this with an open mind, because sometimes the facts are very inconvenient and the truth is very difficult to swallow. But now, let's bring this back here for a second here. You mentioned a number of things. Right now, we are seeing the protesters of the Euro Central Bank, compliments of Mario Draghi, out there in the Euro Central Bank president and the IMF, protesters. In fact, I think 1,100 different offenses or incidents happened over in Frankfurt. So here to date, and it's anarchy, and they've got another 10,000 policemen circling the city, basically. So
I'm gonna let you know. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there in 2 weeks. I'm gonna go over there and see what's going on. I'm gonna drive all over the place and see if I can find out what's happening and talk to the locals, because I don't trust the Rothschild banking cartel news media, and I want to find out for sure what's going on over there. I'll bring my camera with me, take some photos. I'll send them back to you guys. I'll text them back, let you know what's going on. If I see anything, I'll send it right back to you guys. You can put it on your website. But I tell you what. I interviewed Salente a few weeks ago, Gerald Salente on the Power Hour, and I tell you what, I had him on for like 30-40 minutes, and he was talking about Draghi and what's going on with the central bank over there, and he told me right on the air, he goes, the only thing they have left to do, they have no other choice now, they've got to take us to war. He says they're done. They can't keep doing this. Now they're inflating the euro because that's what they're doing. They're destroying the euro by printing more and more euros, trying to reduce the value of that currency against the dollar because the dollar was about to go defunct, and now they're doing it to the euro. It's like all the currencies are racing to the bottom, and once they get to the bottom, and there's no place else to do and no place else to inflate, and everybody's completely in debt, and nobody has anything to do besides pay bankers the rest of their lives for the next 10 generations. They'll start a war, and then they'll start seizing assets when the war is done. And the same thing with the Bank of International Settlements. That's a complete and total Rothschild banking cartel that runs this. The bank there in Basel. There's a great book you can read. It's called The Tower of Basel. It talks about the Bank of International Settlements and how they allowed Hitler to funnel all that money through them. Now think about this. This is a Rothschild-controlled banking group, the Basel Group, the BIA, the Banks of International Settlement. It's the bank for the International Federal Reserve Banks. It's the bankers' bank, right? And they were funneling the money from Hitler to allow the war effort to continue to allow Germany to build their armaments up, and they allowed that to go on. Now, if they're all Jewish, which they are, which the Rothschild family claims to be, which Henry says they're not, but that's what he says they're Satanists. If they are that, and they knew what was going on in Germany, and they cared at all about the Jews that were being persecuted in Germany, why in the world did they allow that to happen, Doug? And that's what I don't understand. See, nobody ever wants to talk about this, and that's why I loved when Henry came on, because Henry's Jewish. And he was part of that whole thing, by the way. He was part of the Kabbalist group. He told us, he didn't tell us that on the air, but I read that in his book. He wished you'd have disclosed that. And he said about 15 years ago, he saw what was going on, and he had an epiphany. He left that behind us. And the thing about it is I made sure everybody understood that Henry is not a Christian. He's going to tell you things tonight you may or may not believe. I mean, Joe was on there. He heard the whole show with me. And I tell you what, you talk about an eye-opening show. And see, he was telling the truth of who these Rothschild people really are and how they're a sect that has basically hijacked everybody in the world with their banking techniques, and that they're awful. They're a bunch of Luciferians, and they maintain the control, like Paul says, Paul McGuire. I agree with Paul, and Russ Dizdar says this too. They do all this child sacrifice all over the world on an ongoing basis because they release the energy from doing that into the atmosphere to maintain this siege on humanity, this trance they've put everybody into. And when you combine that with the whole thing with the drugs and the chemicals they're putting in the water supply and the fluoride and the calcification of our pineal glands. I mean, the other day I was listening to Alex Jones. He said something that I've said 100 times before on the shows. I said, I can't help it if this goes back to Christianity. I can't help it if this whole thing goes back to Luciferianism. I can't help it if it goes back to human sacrifice with children. I said, I can't help it. I said, that's just where this thing goes. And I said, you guys all want to act like none of this religious stuff and none of this Christianity stuff is real. I'm here to tell you, it's real. And I said, and that's what they know. They're scared to death of Jesus. They don't want to hear the name Yeshua. They don't want to talk about Yahweh. They want to talk about turning everything upside down on the planet to bring in the quote-unquote Antichrist, which is going to be their new Messiah, to basically bring in the kingdom of Lucifer. That's their goal. And the problem is nobody wants to talk about this because it makes you think, and quite frankly, Doug, Joe, when you start talking about it, I even think it sounds nuts. Okay? But the problem,
exactly.
but now I've read hundreds of books on it, and I'm like, okay, well, there's something about all this. Even David Icke in his book, I read that for the last time I was on with you guys a month or so ago, in which he said every time he digs into the players in this thing, it always goes back to Satanism and human sacrifice and the shedding of blood. And Dizdar said on the show last week, he said he thinks it has to do with the salt that's used in the blood as far as how they do all this stuff, because salt's been used for centuries in witchcraft and in spells and stuff. So the whole thing about it is that there's something going on in the supernatural right now. We know it's true. Paul McGuire says it's true. I know it's true. Steve Quayle says it's true. And now we got these guys that are going berserk trying to run this How Run Collider this month. Just a few days ago, I had a friend of mine from Switzerland come over. And I asked him, I said, why are you guys set on turning this stupid collider back on again? He goes, well, we're curious. I said, can't you get curious about something else? I said, why do you want to open up the portals to hell? He goes, well, we don't think we're going to do it. We're only going to leave it open for a second or so. I said, you don't know what's going to come crawling out of there. I said, I read all kinds of horrible stuff, and Steve Quayle's had all kinds of reports on what's happened the last time you turned that thing on, but now you're insisting on doing it again. And so,
wow.
oh, gosh, what a mess.
Indeed, it is a mess, and it's when you say, and I want to make this clear, Ted, because I didn't get a chance to listen to the show. We were traveling last week, but when we talk about Jews in the sense the Jewish or the Rothschild, the banking cartel, so many people automatically say, well, it's the Jews. The media is run by the Jews.
It's not.
Can you clarify that for the people? Because,
this is why I brought Harry. This is why I brought Henry on. I apologize. I try not to never use the Jew term, okay, because it makes everybody uncomfortable, okay, because we have all been taught we need to support Israel, and I do pray for Israel, and I do pray because I know Christ is going to reign from there for 1,000 years. I got that, okay. Here's the thing. Henry said that back in the 1600s with a guy by the name of Sabbatain, he came in, he declared himself the Jewish Messiah, and what he did is he wanted to do everything he could to bring in the kingdom of God. And so he basically started telling everybody to do everything the opposite of what the Torah and the Bible said. They already had their Talmud. They were already doing all kinds of crazy stuff anyhow. So they started doing all this horrible stuff and these sins and sacrifices. He talked about this on last Monday night show. You can hear him. Then that was carried on into the 1700s by the Franken people, the guy named Franken or whatever his name was. And he carried it through. And those are the ones who got Rothschild started in this. So what they did, they splintered a group of Jewish folks off into this sect is what it is, a sect of the all-seeing eye. And Henry said the vast majority of the Jewish folks have no idea this is going on, so it's not the Jews. It's this sect that started off in the 1700s that were composed primarily of Jews that has started this entire thing. They brought in the Masonic lodges and infiltrated them, and then they used them as their, quote, Gentile side of this, and they worked together on this. But the vast majority of the Jews have no idea any of this is going on. They're as innocent as the vast majority of the Christians who are a bunch of sheeple being led to the slaughter, and that's why we can't say it's a Jewish conspiracy. It's a Sabbatain-Frankist conspiracy. That's how we have to differentiate that. And Henry Macau was very careful to say that last week. And he goes, look, I won't even consider myself Jewish anymore as far as from a religious standpoint because I'm not going to be involved in any of that stuff anymore because of what they do. They don't believe in the Torah. They don't believe in any of this stuff. Well, so that's what I want everybody to understand. And so everybody gets real uncomfortable with this stuff when we start talking about it because that's why I wanted Henry to be on your show last week because I wanted him to say the stuff that I just said so now I can quote him for what he said. It has nothing to do with a, quote, Jewish conspiracy. George Bush, newsflash, is not Jewish, okay? The Bush family is not Jewish, okay? The Clintons aren't Jewish. Obama's not Jewish. Putin's not Jewish, okay? It has nothing to do with this. It's a cult of the all-seeing eye, which is a splinter group that started back in the 1700s, and now a lot of other people have joined that same group who are not Jewish. So we can't blame this on the Jews. It has nothing to do with the 99% of the Jewish people. It has nothing to do with 99% of the people on the planet. It's this group of people that learn how to use money magic, like Paul says, that they've learned from Alex Alexander, the Huxley, and the other guy of the Satanist Aleister Crowley. Back from 100 years ago, and they've been able to do this and keep this thing alive and keep this spell, this trance on the population of the planet through all of their human sacrifice. This is satanic. That's what this is. If you want to call it a conspiracy, call it a Luciferian satanic conspiracy, not a Jewish conspiracy, not a Christian conspiracy, not a WASP conspiracy. This is a satanic conspiracy that's taking over the planet, that's using the Masonic lodges, the higher level of the Masonic lodges. The lower level Masons have absolutely have no idea what's going on. They got into this thing as a fraternity. A lot of these guys who got in the Masonic lodges, and they're the lower level Masons. They do it because it helps them in business, so they get the preferential treatment, et cetera, et cetera. They don't know what the world that they're worshiping Lucifer until they get the higher levels, like the 32nd and 33 degree. We know that's true because I've talked to a whole bunch of these guys in Masonic lodges. They look at you like you're stoned on something when you start talking about this stuff because they have no idea what you're talking about because that's not exposed to them. See, so that's why we have to call this what it is. We have to call this a satanic conspiracy to bring in the book of Revelation, to bring in the New World Order, to put us all into a feudal system underneath a satanic leader that they're going to bring in once they rebuild the temple, and they're going to shed his blood, and then they're going to crown him King of Kings in their little world, and that's how they're planning on doing this. And these people are that sick, they're that messed up, they're that weird, they really believe all of this stuff. And so please do not call this a Jewish conspiracy. Do not get all bent out of shape with Jews. It is not the Jews that are doing this. It is a satanic group of people that are doing this. It is not the Christians. It is a satanic. George Bush was not a Christian. How can you be a member of Skull and Bones that you have to sodomize one another in caskets and call yourself a Christian? Are you kidding me? That's not a Christian thing. We don't do that as Christians. We don't see all that weirdo stuff and all the call boys that were called into the White House with all these different presidents late at night. And we know all that's true. My gosh, Barney Frank was running a call boy service out of his doggone basement of his house when he had this one gay lover living down there with him. They're a bunch of sickos in Washington. They're a bunch of weirdos up in Washington, and they all need to have we need to get rid of every one of these guys and basically put fresh people in there and restore the republic, Doug. And that's what we have to do. If we don't do that, this country's on a grease chute to hell right now. And Russ Dizdar says once these, quote, super soldiers from all this stuff get released into this thing and they start doing all this terrorism stuff, it's going to bring in martial law almost instantaneously. And I hope the person that I hope is wrong is Russ. Gosh, he's saying there's millions of these guys that are running around now that have gone through this sacrificial stuff and have been subjected to all of this stuff. And I hope and pray he's wrong with those kind of numbers. I really do, Doug. But we have to call this thing what it is. This is a spiritual battle. This has nothing to do with flesh and blood. Jesus called it out. He said this is a battle of principalities and things in high places. And last week on the show, Doug named what those different things were, and they're all different groups of angels in the heavenly host. That's what the different battles about. He did that in the Greek. It was an incredible show last Monday night. You guys, if you haven't heard the podcast, you need to get it.
Yeah, you said Doug. It was Russ who named those, if I'm correct, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
right.
Russ Dizdar. That's Russ Dizdar. That's right. But the thing about it is that we have to understand something. Now we're starting to see this stuff with Hitler, with his traitor, him being a traitor to Germany, his not use of the nuclear weapons. Jim Marrs saying that we used German nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We didn't have the proper detonators. We couldn't get ours to ignite. All of this stuff was going on, back in the 40s. And all the stuff, then all of a sudden we start blowing these things up. And Jim Marrs, I love the way the one thing he said. He goes, then what happened? We started detonating these nuclear bombs, and all of a sudden whoever these other dimensional beings are, they said, wow, the kids have found the matches. We need to go put a stop to this before they start tearing holes through time space with these nuclear detonations. Now, we know that a lot of this stuff is going on. We know that the space program is unbelievably secret. We know the government completely refuses to admit anything about this, why other countries have come on the record and said, yes, it's true, including one of the top cabinet secretary people in Canada. He wrote that whole book on Money Mafia. He talks about all this, and he goes into what's going on with the Rothschild cartel, and he goes into what's going on with the space program, and he's the one who got me to read the book the day after Roswell. And so we've got all of this stuff going on. So now we're finally putting the mosaic of this mess together. In the meantime, they're feeding us GMOs to poison us to change our DNA. They're spraying us constantly with chemtrails. They're giving a lot of people Morgellons disease because of the chemtrails. They're invading us with nanofibers from the chemtrails. They're giving us fluoride to dumb us down and to calcify our pineal glands. They're giving us all of this MSG in our water and in our food and everything else that they're putting it into now in order to try to dumb us down. And they're putting us on these immunization schedules and trying to mandate immunizations on us to come to your house, Doug, your house, Joe, my house, by gunpoint if necessary, and hold us down and inject us. My God, if this isn't fascism, I don't know what you even call stuff like this. I don't even understand how this is happening in the United States, why these people in Congress can even consider this type of legislation, why they think it's okay, why these words holding you down and forcing you to take an injection can even come out of their mouth. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I don't even know. It's like that lady who was held down a few weeks ago over there in Austin, Texas, and to draw blood out of her, they put a bag over her head, and then she was kicking and screaming, so they choked her out with the guy's knee on her throat, bruised her up real bad to withdraw blood. What part of that does anybody listen to right now that's okay? None of this is okay, and nobody wants to talk about it. We've got McDonald's, poisoning us with GMOs and all the chemicals in their food, and nobody wants to talk about it. And I applaud Alex Jones for really nailing Obama, the McDonald's now, and going in and doing what he's doing and exposing these corrupt people. Because McDonald's, you'll hear me say Obama McDonald's, they're hemorrhaging cash along with Monsanto. And I've got a bunch of stories I want to pull up on that too. We get done ranting and raving about what's going on with the New World Order. But I just want everybody to know. Yesterday, somebody called me up and they were talking on the show. And they said, have you read the book, The Real History of America, whatever it was? It's on that one website that Deborah Tavares has. It's called StopTheCrime.net. And yep. I go, oh, yeah, I've read that book. I read the book. And they said, oh, okay, The Real History of the United States. I said, oh, I read the book. And they said, you did? I said, yeah. I said, I hold back. I have to hold back on the power. I don't hold back with you guys, okay? I go full throttle with you guys because if you can put Paul McGuire on the show and Steve Quayle on the show, then your listeners have been primed and programmed. Last Sunday night, I did a show, Doug, on the number one Christian station in Houston on Sunday night, right? And I started talking. I said just some basic stuff about how the bankers had taken over the planet and were running the United States through the Federal Reserve cartel that started in 1913. And oh my gosh, I got all these negative tweets. What in the world does this lady have Ted Broer on this show for? He has no idea what he's talking about. I'm talking about the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and these people don't even want to believe something that basic, Doug. That's how clueless her listeners were. I mean, can you believe that?
Yeah, I can believe that because we run into these kinds of people every day, and we get emails from them every day. It's unfortunate. Now, our audience, and I'll say this, and I mean this with all of my heart, our audience is much more educated, much more informed, so they're at a different, higher level of intellectual prowess and even spiritual prowess as well. So, and that's thanks, to people like yourself and Steve and Russ and Paul and others. But having said all that, it's interesting the moment that you bring up something like the Fed and talk about the Federal Reserve Act and even get into the coincidences, shall we say, of the how that Fed was brought into, even beyond what G. Edward Griffin gets into. For example, Ted, you know about the questions with respect to the Titanic, and isn't it convenient that the majority of the
books
people
on that too? Yeah.
Yeah, the majority of the people that were on the Titanic were against the Federal Reserve Act.
That's right, including John Jacob Astor. That's exactly right.
Okay, and see, people don't want to go there because it's too. Are you telling me that the Titanic was a conspiracy, and immediately people look at you and say, well, you must see conspiracies in everything? No. It's not. It doesn't have to be big conspiracies. Just a bunch of little conspiracies that tie things together, and you can start seeing where we're headed. This is why I love you, man. I mean, you're out there. You're talking what people need to hear, and this history is important, folks. What Ted is saying, what we're talking about, is important because where we were, how we got here, you're not going to understand where we are at unless you understand how we got here. And to understand how we got here is doggone uncomfortable. At least,
But remember what they're doing. They're sacrificing these children and these blood rituals all over the world to maintain this veil over the eyes and the hearts and the minds of the Christians who have become so dumbed down as sheeple because of Romans 13, because of the name it, claim it, blab it, grab it preachers, give me your money, you'll be blessed people who have their clothes